Not who might compete, Mike Pribozie. Back with another Assiniboia show. It's our weekly Assiniboia Downs show. And a new guest this week. We've had lots of different guests on this show, but I had to bring in my buddy Ray Cotolo to talk some thoroughbred racing in Canada. Ray, I know it's not standardbred, but here you are.
I mean that, and I know that I have like a button or two down, but I didn't think I was like a nude guest. I figured I was fairly clothed for this engagement. I could go less if you
do that though, sometimes.
If the audience so wants, I mean we can kind of open things up a little bit, but it's your segment. It's your show.
I think our demographic is. I was just actually looking at the numbers. I think we're at like 95% male. So I don't know.
I mean, in that case, let's go down another. I mean, you never know. You never know.
Ray, Assiniboia Downs handle has been quite large. They just had their big Manitoba Derby Day a couple weeks ago. They had a big handle that night with the mandatory payout pick 5, but very solid. These late pick 4s have been handling over 100,000. We're going to look at Tuesday specifically. Tuesday, August 20th, their late pick 4, $1 minimum, 50,000 guaranteed. You a big Assiniboia fan?
One of the reasons why I agreed to do this segment in particular is that I've dabbled with Assiniboia here and there. And the thing that I really like about it is it forces my brain to work in the same ways that I learned how to handicap thoroughbred racing to begin with. Because as you know, my home track is Penn National.
Right.
And there's something about Assiniboia that just, it invokes a lot of that same type of rural, remote type of racing.
It's almost like winter Penn National is what it reminds me of.
Yeah, like even though Penn is still kind of linked in with like parks and whatever, sometimes the Naira horses come down there. It's still its own contains entity with horses that don't really travel anywhere. And on top of that, the consistency is probably the biggest thing. You really learn how to read horses' patterns and form cycles, especially when you're looking at, the much cheaper horses. So it makes for interesting betting too, I feel.
This is a good card here. Lots of nice allowance races, especially in this late pick 4. And again, $1 minimum. They start late. 8:30 Eastern is the first race. Pick 4 usually goes, it's at 9:50 listed post time. They typically go around 10 p.m. on the East Coast. Race number 4 is a 1X allowance that has a 10,000 optional claiming tag. They're going 7 furlongs, Ray. I'm going to single in this race. I know we were talking off air. You said you didn't like too many of the favorites here.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think this is a race where the favorite might still eke through. It's one of the few favorites in the whole sequence that I have a fairly strong opinion on. And that's just because the 5 horses, the morning line favorite is 7-5, Eagle Express. He's a stalking type, and he has speed to his inside from his stablemate. And it's not necessarily strong speed. It looks like it's going to carry all the way around the 2 turns going 7 furlongs over this track. And with that said, if he has that type of speed coming from his stablemate, it seems like the possibility of the race forming to his liking, the 5 horse specifically, it just seems very likely. And so he might be a favorite. We can't escape inside of this sequence. So he's my lone A inside of this race. But on the off chance that maybe, even if the race forms that way, the 5 still doesn't prevail, I don't necessarily mind the 4 horse Happy Hour. I looked 3 starts ago against Allowance Company. The horse got a win off a similar type of stalking trip. And she seems like the type, that just does well when she's forward. You even look back to her race last out when she dropped in against Weaker, got that confidence-building win by 3 lengths at odds on. Those are the types of performances you like to see from horses moving up in class. And so she's another that's going to be in the prime spot based on how this race appears to map and maybe can get up at a price. So I feel like the 4 is a solid B, but I just can't get around looking at 2 horses coming from the Lee Delarande barn. One of them a speed, one of them a stalker. Seems like the stalker might be able to work things his own way inside of that one.
I'm going to disagree.
Really?
I like the 1. I like Dynamic Strike. And the reason is, for the most part, is the distance. They're going 7 furlongs here, and that's 2 turns at Assiniboia. Whereas, Eagle Express has been racing 6 furlongs, 5.5 furlongs, never really been this far. So that is an interesting, I think, caveat to this race. Now, has faced some toughies at Eagle Express. Kate's Princess, very, very sharp. Slew's Back, a horse that's won a couple in a row here. But I like Dynamic Strike because just second in a mile last time in the Manitoba lost to a repeating Midnight Lady. Ran into that one back on July the 15th, also going 7.5. Now, this horse has plenty of speed. I think is going to get the jump on a lot of these closers. Now, you could be right that the 3 could be sent on a speed mission to kind of soften up the 1, and that would certainly compromise her chances and really set it up for the 5. But I just think the 5 might be a little overbet in the race, has to do something different that she's not used to doing. The one's been keeping very good company and is going to be ahead of the 5. So can the 5 track the 1 down? We'll see. I just think that the 5 has the better pace dynamic in the spot.
My main issue with that 1 horse specifically, and at the very least, because this is the opening leg of the sequence, we have the luxury of looking at how the board is playing, who's taking what money and type and all that. But seeing this 1 at 9-5 on the morning line and looking down the page, seeing that this horse very often breaks slowly as a speed type, that just seems like such a risk for me to take on a horse that's probably going to be a short price inside of the race, considering too that we know there's probable speed to the outside that might want to try and go a little harder than maybe the 1 has gone in the past going these 2-turn races. You look to that Manitoba Oaks race, for instance, the horse was slow out of the break, even though he got out third. It was 3 lengths behind the leader as they made their way to the turn. And, stuff like that can impair a horse tremendously, especially if they're one that likes to go forward. And so it's possible. I just don't like that you're going to be probably getting a short price on him, and already you're kind of coin flipping that he's going to get or she's going to get away well. It's tough to really gauge horses that struggle with the break and are also that type of trip dependent. But I'll give you the fact that she does have the back class, and that might be enough against a group like this.
She does. And if you look at her pace figures, I'm not sure how much you use Formulator, DRF Formulator, but her pace figures are coded in red, her last 2 races. And that's something also that a lot of these others don't have. So I do think she will be in front, even if she does maybe break a little slow like she has recently. She's been involved in some pretty fast paces against decent horses. I don't think she's going to have to face a lot of that here. So she's definitely going to get the jump. It's just a matter of can the 5, track this one down.
I mean, and I'm looking at that Jack Hardy line too, which granted stakes line, we're looking at an allowance race, but she got the trip that I'm imagining she's going to want to try and get inside of this race, and then really didn't last either. So I have a tough time gauging, for one, how well she's going to handle the 2 turns, especially since there's going to be pressure on her early. And again, you don't know if she's going to get the break. And there's another horse later in the sequence that I kind of feel the same way about, that also is a not probable favorite, but one that many might use that I'm against.
Let's go to race number 5. It's another allowance.
Yeah.
The race 5. It's another with a optional tag of 10. They're going 6 furlongs here, Ray. And these are the boys' version of this.
Yeah, and the horse I was actually alluding to is also the one inside of this race, Spire. He doesn't he's one that looks like he breaks better from the outside stalls, and from the inside stalls, he gets away a little slower. And that it's another one where he's 4-1 on the morning line. So I think he's the second or third choice then inside of this race, especially going a sprint. I don't like that type of guessing game on a horse that's going to be a short price here. I do like 2 of the speed horses inside of this race, though. The 3, Lieutenant Norm, I like on the drop back. This is a guy who you look down the page when going 5 furlongs was okay, was 3rd in a stakes race. That was after a maiden special weight win. That was the first start for the barn, too. So a pattern like that, or at least a progression like that, bodes a lot of confidence in my mind, or at least they know that this horse is fairly sharp. Was great going 1 turn, and then they experimented with making this horse go 2 turns. And it didn't really seem like that necessarily was his cup of tea, though. He was 3rd in the Manitoba Derby. I think he's going to appreciate going back to 1 turn. And on top of that is maybe a bit flattered by his more lofty stakes tries. But I see everything I need to know about this guy from those May 21st, June 3rd lines. This is a horse that should be good at a sprint. I feel 5-1 on the morning line. You're probably not going to get that inside of this race. But if he's like the second or third choice, that seems like fair odds in my mind on a guy like this who should be going forward. But I like him. I also like the 7, Magnolia Speed. I'm surprised that this is a horse that won in a stakes race. over Assiniboia Downs. He's 15-1 on the morning line inside of this race. I know he was with a different barn at the time. He's now racing in the Lee Delarande barn and not in Jerry Gurneau's barn. Why? I'm not necessarily sure, but he got a win in an optional claiming race back on July 3rd. It got a nice stocking trip doing that too. He's another one that I just don't think he liked going 2 turns. He's cutting back to 1 turn. And at 15-1 on the morning line, he's the exact type of horse you probably want to use in a sequence like this. I'm just surprised that he really flew that far into the fringe, and that a horse like the 8, Starship Chewbacca, is the morning line favorite from that outside draw. I just don't really know what type of trip he's going to get. He could just blast out and at least get into the 2 path and battle for the lead. That's probably his best hope inside of a race like this. But again, you have that outside draw. You could get carried a little wide, and being carried in the 3 path, 4 path around a track like Assiniboia, that can cost you a couple of lengths, and that can make even like the hardiest of speeds falter in the stretch. So this seems like a beatable favorite. I like the 3 and the 7. I also know that the horse that you like inside of this race, or at least one of the horses you like inside of this race, I have as a B as well. That's the 5, Mr. Dazzle. But talk to me about this one, because you kind of convinced me on him a little bit. I just had a hard time with this guy being an 8-year-old. He had that win going 1 turn back on June the 5th, but he hasn't really been himself since,
Well, he's just faced tougher horses. Blazing Bow is very hot around here, had won 3 races in a row. Ran and it was just too far back there on July 22nd. That's a total pitch race for me. And then was claimed out of the August 5th race, and that was Manitoba Derby night. Again, another tough race. This horse was, sort of made a move around the turn and then flattened out. I like the fact that they did dip in for 10,000 to claim this 8-year-old, and this barn is very sharp, 28%, and is capable off the claim. So I think a use in the race. The thing about, you mentioned a couple of things. Starship Chewbacca has been favored the last 2 starts. Speed is really his game. He couldn't get the front last time, and that really affected him. When he can't be up front mixing it up, he typically doesn't race very well. And now there's not a lot of speed in this race, so that could maybe benefit him, and he's a little bit scary if he is able to get the front, because he does want to fight for it. But I'll use the 5. I'll use the 6, Curly Issa, who's racing very well. Beat Starship Chewbacca 2 back on July the 23rd, and then just missed on that August 5th race against Sloosback. Probably should have won that race, honestly. Just got going just a little bit too late. Wasn't able to track down the top 2 there, but another 2 or 3 jumps, probably was going to get there. That one's 6-1 morning line. Agree on your 3, Lieutenant Norm. I like the drop out of the Manitoba Derby. Raced pretty well in that race. I mean, it was 34-1 in there, going a mile and 1/8. This horse is more a sprinting type. And the fact that this horse, I think, is improving. Last 2 figures have gone up. Racing against stakes type, I think, could appreciate the drop back to 6 furlongs in here. Now, the question is what kind of trip? Well, probably needs to be stalking, I would think, in that second flight to try to win this race. But 5-1 morning line, it's pretty wide open race. I think 3, 5, 6 for me there. And maybe I might use the 8 as a backup, just because I do think that he's very speedy in game. It's just a matter of he has to get the right trip for him.
Between the 2 of us, it's basically just take the whole field against the 2 favorites.
No, I mean, we're on a couple similar ones. Yeah, we're on a couple similar ones.
I feel like that 3 gets the perfect draw, though, to land into the second flight, though, since you mentioned it. You want to be inside if you're that type of horse.
Yeah, I do think the drop in distance will help that one. Let's go to race number 6. And this is a decent allowance race here. They're going for 24,000, 5.5 furlongs. Ray, who do you like here?
I'll start by mentioning my B, because he's a single, and he's a B I probably would lean on a tad, especially since he's 8-1 on the morning line. Though, you get a guy like Antonio Whitehall on him. You don't really know if he's going to get forgotten on the board like that. But Run Today is such a strong speed. Granted, in a race that has loads of other strong speeds, but these types of races, when they unfold, they usually go one of 2 ways. Way one is that all the speed torches itself, and then closers come in to dampen the flames. But sometimes too, the race goes fast enough that even the closers, they're on their second. They don't find a second wind. They're just lugging along because they're exasperated from trying to keep up with whatever's happening. I feel like if the latter happens here, because the amount of speed is present, Run Today, just given that inside draw, he might be able to just crawl over the finish line and win the race. So he could potentially be like a value single in that sense. But otherwise, I have 3 A's in here. They're all ones that are going to most likely be stalking, or horses that are going to want to try and capitalize off of whatever tumultuous speed might unfold. The 2 Mr. Stang, one of them, this horse, you just look down the page, stakes record, has a stakes resume for 1. And so now he moves into this allowance race, drop in class. He's raced well in the stakes. He won a stake on June 26th. He's a logical one to want to try and capitalize. The 4 Brody Streak, another one that's done well in some stakes races, though. When extending to 7.5 furlongs, a mile, not necessarily at his best, but cuts back to a sprint. And so he might be able to work into a stalking trip inside of a race like this. And then the 6 Totalizer is another one that I think might be able to do exactly what he did last time. You know, he had all that speed unfold in front of him, launched from pretty much last, got the win, was 3-1, was bet inside of that race too. And so he's shown that he can do that. Now, these horses, sometimes, you know, they don't go a 1-to-1 replication of the performance. He might be flat as hell inside of a race like this. But the fact that he's shown that is that's a tool he has in his holster, especially in a race like this where the speed might cave. He's a threat no matter what. He's 6-1 on the morning line, so he feels worth using in that way. The unfortunate thing is the 2 and the 4 are they're pretty much favorites inside of this race, and so they aren't going to provide that much value in the sequence, especially since the A's are a spread. But again, I don't want to leave out of the realm of possibility the 1 run today might just be running away with it, you know.
Yeah, I don't mind the 1. I think run today's a use just because of the speed. And, you know, now you get away from the apprentice jockey. You go to Whitehall here. And this horse is just a one-way type, you know, where he's going to go. And, you know, he's going to go as fast as he can for as far as he can. And he could get away in here. Now, there's other speed in this race. And that's certainly true. I don't mind the 4 Brody Streak. You mentioned that one. This is just a drop here and has shown speed in the past. And does, you know, lure the apprentice jockey off of the 1 horse. So he had been riding that one, ends up on this horse, and he's ridden this horse 5 times in a row, a couple wins for this one here. So I'd imagine that this one will be quite close to the front also. So that one would be a use. I don't mind the 8 here, Market King, 25-1 morning line, and just comes off the claim. Now, if you look back, this horse was a double bar, came back from a year layoff last time, and took money, was 9-1 in that race. My thing is this horse was claimed by the previous trainer here. So, you know, they had this horse last year. Well, if you look, the line's back for last year, lots of 1s here on the card here, won 2 races and was second in another. And then in the prior year had won another race with an 85 figure up here. So plenty of speed. I would say getting back to the old barn, maybe they have the key to this one. And 25-1 morning line, you could do a lot worse than this horse, especially given the horse hadn't been out in the year and just ran a poor effort. So you're going to get a decent price on that one. I think that one's a use. And I'll use the 7, Jeff Fafa. It's 9-5 morning line. I'm not crazy about that, but has been keeping good company. Blazing Bow, 2 starts in a row. Well, nothing's been beating that horse around here. This horse has been competitive. I think the 5.5 suits this one, but another speed type. So, you know, who's going to win the speed competition? But they might all lose the war. It's a really tough race. And, you know, I think there's a lot of different ways you can go in here, but I do think that you could get some separation in this 6th race. There's really, you know, no one I really think you can hang your hat on.
That 7 is an absolute pitch to me. That's a textbook horse. They're dueling with another, and they will refuse to pass, no matter how the race sets up, no matter how it unfolds. Even if this guy's been in much tougher competition, you know, there are other horses that have good resumes inside of this race as well. We know there's going to be inside speed. We know he's going to be outside speed. We've seen even against tougher horses, just being outside speed, you know, totals him. And so, in my mind, at 9-5 on the morning line, I want nothing to do with him. I'll say
here's my thing with him, though, right? Like, here's my thing with him is like his last 2 races are at 7.5 on a mile, and he's shown speed. Now he's dropping back to 5.5. He's not going to be on the front in this race. He could end up in the prime stalking spot given his speed. But
he's been able to break though well going 5.
Well, yeah, he has in the past, but I'm saying coming out of those 2 longer races, he might not be quite as sharp as some of the sprinters are, and that might give him a different trip.
I don't necessarily see that happening, and that's at that point that's just a difference of opinion. I will say though, this is a now or never spot for the 8 also, so this is a great price. This is a great place to try and get a price on him, but he's another one that's going to probably be in that tough spot. The 7 is most likely going to be inside of that speed battle, but you also got to wonder, he's an 8-year-old now. He's only raced 4 times in the last 2 years. When he is racing, it's usually just in like 3 race spurts before having to go on rest. So you're an 8-year-old. It looks like you have some soundness issues potentially. And it's you want to hope that you get like a 40-50 to 1 on him.
Yeah, horse is going to play well in multis though, and back to a one that previously had him and raced well for in the past. So this horse could definitely get lost, especially in this pick 4 sequence where a lot of people are just going to dismiss, especially off that last race and the big morning line.
Yeah, and I mean, there are other races we talked about where the favorites seem kind of weak, and then the last leg of the sequence too. 6-5 morning line, but that race looks like it can go anyway.
Well, let's go to that last race. It's the 7th race, and this is a pretty bottom level claimer here. It's 3 claimers, non-winners of a race in a year. So going a mile, you mentioned the favorite here. The 6 is 6-5 morning line coming off a claim and 2 second place finishes in its last 2 starts. The figures tower above almost everything in here. I know though that you picked a few for your ticket.
I don't like being in a position where the favorite is like a defensive use. And, if you even hear that and you go, I don't either, and I don't want to use the horse, it's like, cool. I mean, in all honesty, that might even be the better play. But this horse feels like he looks like he has the ability where he should trounce a group like this. But also, there are so many warning signs that are being thrown out here as well. Granted, he was in for 3 2 starts ago, but then went up to 5, got claimed for 5, and is dropping in for 3.
Claimed for 4, actually, but 4.
Okay. Still, maybe $1,000 is $1,000. Who knows? But it's usually weird to see a horse get claimed and then get put in for a lower class. You would think that maybe if the horse was amounting to something that would be progressive, that you would want to try and go for a bigger purse. But that's all ultimately just like game theory types of things coinciding with handicapping. But I just see the second, the horse he's one that sometimes just gets running too late. And so he could be one of those favorites that just takes the default money because the numbers are good. But I mean, I don't really know how he gets into the race, or he'll have to hope to luck into the race. But this is as we were talking about too, this is one that there aren't really horses that scream form that you can lean on. And I don't necessarily think you would get that from a 3,000 claimer when you think about it. The 3 house limit's a reasonable one inside of this race too, but he's no surprise. He's 3 to 1 in the morning line. At the very least, he can break out of the gate. And I like with a race like this, that's a mile and it's these cheap horses. If you're a horse stretching out, even if you have experience going 2 turns, it's good to see horses that are gaining in those sprints moving to the routes. And so the 3 is one that usually was gaining going shorter. So you would presume that maybe the horse can handle going longer. And on top of that, can at least break okay. So he probably would be within like the 2nd or 3rd flight. And as long as the horse just wants to keep moving forward, that should give him an inherent edge over many of the others inside of this race. I kind of felt the same way about the 7 Celerity, though he's more of a deep closer. He's still going forward at the end of his miles, but I was kind of curious what the 2 will do inside this race. Will knows. 20 to 1 on the morning line. He hasn't won a race. He's 0 for 5 this year, but he won a couple races last year. Picks up a rider who is yet to win this meet, but he gets an inside draw, which is good for a deep closer in my mind. And on top of that, you look down his page, he's racing okay against an hours at 3,000 company. And he's one that also might benefit going longer because he's been going those 1-turn races here at Assiniboia, is stretching out. He's been kind of best of the rest of those 1-turn types. And, if the trip works out and if others don't show up, he gets the 10-pound apprentice too. Now I look at it as well. Maybe he wakes up. Maybe he gets over the finish line in front. This is a race where you can use the 6 as a favorite and spread a touch, but I mean, it can just go so many different ways. Ultimately, none of these horses really want to go a mile when you look at it.
Yeah, it's true. I'm looking at the 6th though, and I look at his back lines. If you look back at that June 4th line, faced Willis Chill, who came back to win a couple races here this meet. Faced a repeating winner last time on July 23rd, and then was claimed. So I do think is fast enough, has back lines. The mouse suits quite well, better than most of these other ones. If you're going to use this one for me, I just think that this is probably one you want to stand alone with. If you don't like, then I would tend to kind of use some others in here. So we're going to wrap here. Here's, you see my pick 4 ticket across the screen. I had Ray's up just now. I'm a couple singles on the first and last legs, and then spreading in the middle. And here's Ray's ticket. Ray, final thoughts here for Assiniboia on Tuesday.
Yeah, I feel like that 4th race, you might be able to kickstart it with a solid single. And on top of that, if you are watching the board and stuff and you see the 5 taking like a bit more play than you would expect, that could potentially be a good sign for him as a single. And on top of that, these last few races really could open the door to some either big prices or even like your middle of the road, 3rd choice, 4th choice, 5th choice. And, you can still make a pretty decent score when those types of outcomes unfold. You could also, of course, play my all B ticket, which is $1 total that goes 4 with 5 with 1 with 2. And I guarantee that if that came in, you probably take down the whole pool.
Well, catch Assiniboia again Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday nights, 8:30 Eastern time. Dollar pick 4s, those last 4 races. It's a dollar minimum and 50,000 guarantee. Again, they've been getting 100,000 easily in those pick 4s that they've been paying extremely well. Last week, the sequence that we covered paid excellent with 3 favorites and a 5-1 in the last race, paid several $100s. So get in on Assiniboia Downs. This has been a production of In the Money Media. Our president is Peter Thomas Fornatale. I know Ray is always happy to hear that. We'll see you guys next time.